Is the current education system a waste of money?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, Brian, I'm really excited about this show because I feel like this is something that a lot of folks ask. Like, you have this one camp that says education is the most empowering, most amazing, most wonderful thing in the world. And there's this other camp of folks that say education is an absolute waste. By all means, don't put your money there. There are other ways. And so I got to believe a lot of our audience out there is wondering, what's the right answer? What should I do? What should I encourage my family to do? What should I encourage my loved ones to do?
Yeah, and I think that is the question these days. Is education worth it? You know, that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this show. But I got to tell you, Bo, I was kind of nervous about doing this show today.
Okay.
There's just a lot of, I don't know, education has fundamentally been such a big thing in my life that I didn't want to screw this up.
Sure.
Because I think about you coming from humble beginnings. I think about me and my mom being a school teacher, my grandmother being a school teacher, and then kind of what even inspired this show. There's something just magical about education. And, you know, and I think one of the things we talked about, and I even had the team put this slide in there, and you had a cool experience share
Sure.
on this too, but there's a Dr. Seuss quote that I think is really powerful. It's the more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. And, you know, and I put the book, you know, we put that up there on the screenshot. And you said, how are you using the places you'll go?
Yeah, so I didn't know this. My oldest daughter just started kindergarten, and apparently the thing that you do is you buy this book, and at the end of every year, kindergarten through 12th grade, you ask your kid's teacher to like write a note in there about where, you know, what they hope that'll happen and about the year or whatever. And then at graduation, you're supposed to give it to them so they can kind of read all their teachers, what they've said about them. I think that's a pretty neat little thing. I hope we can actually stick to doing it.
Well, education is, I think it is so noble in the fact that it's also it's a superpower in the fact that you can come from anywhere, any beginnings, but if somebody will hold the ladder for you and actually start teaching you, and that's one of the reasons I love what we do, because I always thought I was going to retire in a career as a college professor or something like that. Little I know, I was going to work in a classroom, a virtual classroom with millions of people. It's been tremendously fulfilling, but the part I love is when you guys send me emails, tell me how we've changed your life. And when I used to substitute teach all through college, and I can remember teaching math especially when somebody was on maternity leave or something like that, and you got to be the substitute teacher for the same class for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. You got to teach concepts. I could see the light bulb go off when somebody catches a concept, and that's the most powerful thing. And I even I read the book Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, and he had I recorded this quote because I thought it was so just incredible, and it tells you the power of education. His quote was, "Getting into a schoolhouse and studying would be the same as getting into paradise." And I think a lot about the fact of education is that light bulb, that ladder, to let you unlock the best version of yourself. And so it's always been considered a noble thing to invest in yourself. It's a good thing to focus on education, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So here's where I wanted to go with today's show.
Sure.
I wanted to go traditional education. Let's talk about traditional education, economic benefits, because we're going to do this all the money guy way where we give you stats and figures. But then I do want to talk about some of the danger zones think about student loans and other stuff. And then I want to close it out with, how does education fit into this new modern world where it's not as traditional as it once was? So that's kind of how we set today's show up.
And so I think as you think about your educational journey, I feel like the first place that a lot of folks get to make their first educational choice, right? There's some choice that they're allowed to make, or that maybe your parents have to step up and make, is, what about high school? Is graduating from high school something that I should do? Is it something or is it a waste of time? Should I not worry about that? Should I get immediately into the workforce as quickly as possible? And we found that there's actually some indicators that it probably is a net positive. There are some really good things that come from getting at least a high school education.
Yeah, it's without a doubt. I mean, education in high school is free, especially if you go to a public school system. So there's definitely a lot of value with knowing the basics, but we actually wanted to put numbers to it. We wanted to know the economics of what does it mean to go to school versus not going to school. And we actually had Daniel pull some stats on that.
Yeah, there was actually a show that we did. This is probably a couple of weeks ago now, and it was talking about like markers of success that would likely keep you out of poverty. What are some of those markers? And it's interesting. Number one marker that they listed that would decrease your likelihood of ending up in poverty later in life was graduating high school. So right there, even just sort of from a very base level wealth building, staying above the poverty line standpoint, graduating high school was a big one. It was one of the big three that they notated. So let's talk a little bit about what you can earn, right? So what are the lifetime earning opportunities by education level? And this is what we found, that if you have less than a high school degree, less than a high school diploma, and this is data from Georgetown University, the lifetime learnings on average is about $973,000 that you'll earn over a working career. And I think this was roughly a 40-year or so working career. So then the question becomes, if I do then make the choice to graduate high school, if I want to go sort of in that direction, how does that impact my ability to go out and earn a wage? How does that impact my ability to go create income? And we found that the average wages earned by someone with a high school diploma is $1.3 million. That's a $300,000 or a 33% pickup in those that did not finish with a high school diploma. I think that in and of itself, especially considering that high school is free, right? If you want to go into the public education system, that it seems almost crazy, dare I say, not to do that if it's going to set you up that much better.
And that's a great setup for that previous slide we had, where if you graduate high school, if you don't have children before 21 and you get married, I think we figured the stat on that is 97 and 98% way to avoid poverty.
That's right.
I mean, so those three things. So graduating high school is still something to be very much celebrated because it lifts you up past some of the traps or poverty concerns I think we all worry about.
And so then I think a lot of folks say, okay, well I get that. So obviously I'm gonna get my high school diploma. I'm gonna do that. But should I go get an advanced degree? Should I opt or elect to go to college to get some sort of increased degree? And this is what the data from Georgetown found, is that for folks who have some college, meaning they basically just step foot on a college campus, they have a lifetime earning potential of a little over $1.5 million. So just by stepping foot on campus, you increase your lifetime earnings by almost $250,000 over someone who just graduated high school. Well, then you take that a step further and say, okay, I don't just attend a few classes, but actually earn a degree. I get my associate, my 2-year degree. Lifetime earnings go from about $1.5 million up to about 1.7. And a lot of like community colleges, which will provide a mechanism where you can obtain an associate's degree, in states like Tennessee, offer it for free, so long as you can keep your grades above a certain level. So if you think about making the decision to not graduate high school all the way to, okay, I'm going to go to some college and I'm going to at least get a degree, an associate's degree, there's a big difference in lifetime earnings from $973,000 over your career to almost $1.7 million over your career.
Definitely an education hack is going to community college because it's so much more affordable. And as you can see, it also helps you economically. And then I love, because it's going to dovetail nicely into your bachelor's degree that's coming up next, is that there is a good education hack is you could go to community college, transfer to the big 4-year degree, where it costs a lot more to go to school those last 2 years. But guess what? Your diploma looks exactly like the people who've been there 4 and 5 years ahead of you. So it's definitely something to pay attention to with education.
So you can see that with a bachelor's degree, making the decision to go attain in most often cases a 4-year degree, your lifetime earnings go from $1.7 million over your career to $2.3 million. You take that a step further and go to your master's degree, your lifetime earnings go to almost $2.7 million. And then it's not depicted here, but we even have the numbers for doctoral. If you want to pursue a doctoral degree, lifetime earnings on average, according to Georgetown University, is about $3.2 million.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, well, that's great. Lifetime earnings. How can we quantify this in terms of wealth building? So we said, all right, let's just take these income levels and let's assume that they were earned evenly over the course of a working career. So over 40 years, if this is how much you earn, you just earned a set amount, these numbers divided by 40. And let's say that you're a fan of the Money Guy show and you said, you know what, I'm going to save 25% of the income I generate for the future, how does this increase in income translate to an increase in wealth? And what we found was, if we just assume a very conservative 8% rate of return over a 40-year working career, you can see that even those who have less than high school, if they can just save 25% of their gross income over the course of their working career, they can still have almost $1.8 million. So what this shows me is that wealth is attainable no matter your education level if you have the discipline to be able to save money. And you can see that as you go from less than a high school degree to a high school diploma, it goes to $2.4 million. And then to some college, $2.8 million of an ending portfolio. An associate's degree, 3.1, a bachelor's degree, 4.1, and then a master's degree. If you have that additional income and you save that 25%, you can have a retirement portfolio after 40 years of almost $5 million. Very different from the 1.7 for those with less than a high school degree.
Two big takeaways for me, you said it, is the fact that just this right here shows the power of time and money and discipline of if you will put the money to work, even if you don't earn a great income, it can still turn into something pretty substantial. But then the second point for me was, and you guys vetoed me in the content meeting, I wanted to put up the poster of all the supercars in the garage and then, and then the mansion in the background, because this is what they did to motivate all of us kids in the 80s, was all kids had these education that says, reason for higher education. We even put it in the poster of it, an updated poster in our intern room here at the office. If you come by and see the
office, you will see that poster on the wall.
But this is showing even, because it is a, 3 to 4 fold increase of the opportunity that education provides if you apply this correctly.
So immediately the conclusion you would draw is, oh wow, education is worth it. I mean, you just showed the higher my education goes, the more I can earn, and the more I can earn, the more wealth I could be. So education must be a no-brainer, right?
Well, this is the dark side of education that's been bothering me, is that we've taken something so pure, so noble, and now it's become distorted. And this is why I did want to talk about, yes, there's a great return on investment with education if done appropriately, but more and more often we're seeing the negative impacts of debt, high cost, runaway cost in education. And we want to kind of put some numbers to that, let you see these are the factors. Don't let somebody mislead you with how good education is, to where on the backside they're sneaking in things that undermine all the opportunity and potential you could have of increasing your earnings. Because we have found a way, and this is what I don't like, is we have found a way to turn something so pure, so noble, into where it actually could be a detriment to your wealth creation in the long term. That's bad, and we want to give you all the indicators to watch out for so you can equip and not fall into the traps.
So we know that right now student debt is at all-time highs, and it's increased more than 100% over the last 10 years. So just in the last decade, it's increased by 100%. Well, the question you might be asking is, well, why is student loan debt so high? The reason is because the cost of college has continued to increase. It's gone up 169% since 1978 after adjusting for inflation. So in today's dollars, in 1971, the cost of a public university was about $9,000. If you fast forward, and I think this data is as of 2016, 2017, it's up to $22,000. Again, this is data from the College Board. So as the cost of college has increased, so too has the debt burden that students are taking on.
I want to make sure that we, because this can get confusing. This is where sometimes charts can become charts that you're like, what is that saying necessarily? We had Daniel go pull the research, and we brought what education costs in the 70s, early 70s. We brought it up into today's dollars after adjusting it for inflation. So if you were trying to, because you want to have an apples to apples analysis, we found out that if you brought up what education costs back in the 70s to today's dollars, just like Bo said, it was $9,000. Compare that to what college actually costs now. It's around $22,000 a year. So you can see that's not fair. We've more than doubled the cost of something even adjusting for inflation, that I don't like that. That bothers me.
One thing that we did, and I thought this was interesting because we've talked about this on a previous show. It's interesting. A lot of our team members here at Abound Wealth Management and the Money Guy Show have graduated from the finest university in all the land, the University of Georgia. You can see it displayed right there.
Go Dogs.
And one of the things we thought was interesting is let's not just look at all public universities, but let's look at like actual case studies of dollars that are being spent. If you look at the in-state tuition rates at the University of Georgia in 1998, it was about $3,000.
That's for the year. That's to go for the year.
For the year, that's right. Fast forward to 2008, and it's gone from 3,000. It's doubled to 6,000. Fast forward another decade from 2008 to 2018, and it's almost 12,000. It seems like it's doubling every decade.
So this data point, this is the reason we did this. I graduated in the mid-90s. So this is I got a better deal than even the $2,900 a year that it was in 1998. And we did this because that's a little after I graduated college at Georgia. And then you take the same thing, Bo graduated, a decade later in 2008. It's 6,000. So we doubled. You can see you more than doubled. What I think is bizarro is then you fast forward to when Daniel graduated from the University of Georgia. We had a doubling again. It's not like we said, hey, in 1998 to 2008, it went up $3,000. So it went from $2,900 to $6,000. So in 2018, it's going to be $9,000.
Another $3,000.
No. It doubled. They understand. Education has figured out this whole concept of compounding growth in not a good way. And that's what I don't like, is it looks like I stole my degree for getting it for less than $3,000 a year. Meanwhile, and by the way, this was 2018. I guarantee if we looked at this number now, we're well beyond the $12,000 a year. That's a disconnect from reality. And that's the one thing that I would encourage more universities, more education providers, be careful that you're not breaking the thing that gives you power, because has the cost of education when I was there, because by the way, when I was at the University of Georgia, it was still like 26,000 students.
Sure.
It was still huge buildings, big, beautiful land and everything else. It's not like all of a sudden after I graduated that it turned into the University of Georgia. No, it just there's a disconnect there that I would challenge all higher education, because guess who's carrying the weight of these huge increases? It's our youth.
That's exactly right. I think it's interesting. Brian, I think this is an encouraging but also a discouraging stat, I think. We found in our research preparing for this show that the class of 2019 graduated with an average of $29,900 in student loan debt. So the average student loan debt for someone graduating in 2019 was $30,000. That means that someone is basically starting $30,000 in the hole when they come out. Now, here's where I say it's sort of an encouraging, discouraging thing. The average salary for recent college grads, according to our research, was about $43,000.
Yeah.
And if you've listened to the Money Guy rule of thumb, we say if you are someone who must take on student loan debt, one of the things we always encourage you is don't ever accumulate more student loan debt than you anticipate your first year's salary will pay. If you can do that, you set yourself up, given the circumstances, in a better spot that someone runs it up higher than that. But you still can't ignore the fact that that person is starting in the negative. They're starting kind of behind. They've got to play a game of catch-up.
That's what it's the opportunity cost of what could become of those dollars. I drink my flavored water out of this koozie. It says this $1 beer cost me $88. The whole concept of that is that the younger you are, you know how powerful, like $1 for a 20-year-old has the potential 45 years later to turn into $88. $1 for the 30-year-old has the potential to turn into $23. $1 for the 40-year-old has the potential to turn into $7. You quickly see that this thing, it gets away from you. So every year that we take $1 away from a young person to save for themselves, to invest for the future, because they're paying back a higher cost of education than they should have paid, you're taking away from their army of dollar bills for the future. And that's something that we wanted to kind of address. Now, I do love the fact that at least it's healthy in the fact that if you were making greater than what your student loan debt is out of college, you have the ability to pay it back. But that doesn't mean that still we shouldn't mourn the army of dollars that didn't make it in because you got overcharged for education.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people think of student loan debt in terms of the cost of the interest. So if you're a parent and you're encouraging your child to go to college, say, yeah, but interest rates are low and maybe your student loan will have 4%. The cost of that $1 of debt is not as much the 4% interest that you will carry. It's exactly what you said. It is the 88 time over compounding effect that you will not be taking advantage of. So it's something you have to think through when you're making those decisions.
So we've shown, and I'm going to talk about it a little later today, on this new economy we're in, where it seems like knowledge and expertise has a value even above getting certificates and designations have done in the past. But we felt like, how do you know if you should go further with your education? We actually created a checklist.
That's exactly right. And we wanted you to think through, if you're thinking about furthering your education, this is the order, maybe the financial order of operation for taking on additional education. This is what you think through. And I thought, Brian, this first one, you added this, and I thought this was beautiful. You said, be brutally honest. Is this something that will actually be beneficial for me and my family and my future self?
Well, look, and I hate to say this because, like I said, I love education. I didn't want to screw this show up, but when I think about what I see going on colleges to a degree, there's some things that feel a little disconnected in the fact that I don't think you should go to college to be entertained. And I feel like that because, like, my daughter was telling me that
That's
she
a hot take.
Well, I mean, she was looking at some things. You probably used that wrong, but she was looking at some things. She says, "Oh, look, this college has a whole course on Harry Potter," and I'm like, what the heck? You don't go to college to take a course on Harry Potter. I mean, and yes, go watch and start a club. If we're not reading books anymore, you can go start a club that watches Harry Potter movies.
But that's not the purpose of going to college.
And there's a perfect quote on this, and this is from William Crawford, and here's the quote. Being a student is easy. Learning requires actual work. And if you want to know proof on this, if you think I'm just the old man on the porch yelling at everybody about how they're doing this wrong, think about the stat that only 27% of people are actually working in their field of study.
So think about that. People went off to school. They said, you know what, I'm going to go invest in myself. I'm going to go get a degree. It's likely going to cost money. I'm going to possibly incur debt, but I'm going to go pursue this degree that I'm going to use for the rest of my life. And only 27% of folks actually end up working in a field that matches that degree. There's a huge mismatch. That is an inefficient use of time and resources. So I think a lot of people have been doing that wrong. They've been approaching the decision to go get additional education from the wrong standpoint.
So going to college, good. I'm happy you're going to college. Just make sure you're doing it in a way that will be economically viable after you graduate college. You're not going to school to be entertained. You're going to pick up a skill set.
So, all right, what's the next check mark? It is explore all of your other options, including trade schools, certifications, or community college. Just because you think you might want to go back and get an advanced degree, or perhaps you never got your bachelor's degree and you want to go get your 4-year degree, that doesn't mean that you have to go to the traditional 4-year, well-known public university with the football team in the fall. There are a lot of options out there for advancing your education.
Well, and these two are somewhat interconnected in the fact that I want you also to be thinking about what you're going to actually be doing. I mean, I have a senior in high school. My daughter is in her final year of high school, so we get every day when I go to the mailbox, we're inundated with colleges trying to convince us to send our daughter to their school. And then, your senior year, the high school is organizing, telling you about financial aid and all the things you need to be thinking about. And here's what I found interesting. Living in the state of Tennessee, we're not born here, so we're kind of new to the community as of the last 5 to 6 years. And I'm kind of interested to learn that, by the way, in the state of Tennessee, if you have good grades, your kids get to go to community college for free, meaning the first 2 years of school, if they go to community college, are free. The other thing is, if it's a STEM institution, meaning it's a science, technology, engineering, any of those type of majors, it's also highly subsidized by the state of Tennessee. Guys, this needs to go into your decision making. It's because here's what I found very interesting when I was sitting in this senior parent meeting, was I was like, wait a minute. So if you choose a STEM major, you get subsidized by the state where they're going to pay for your college. Wow, that's pretty
Sounds
powerful.
pretty good.
And then, okay, well, that means there must be a catch after you graduate in the fact that do you make less money? I'm like, no, wait a minute. There's all the research shows STEM jobs pay incredibly well. That's a plus. That's another check the box. What's the negative? I'll tell you what the negative is. You have to work in college. It's once again back to don't go to college to be entertained. Go to college to learn something because that is what's going to create economic opportunity for you. And this is the part. Look, I was an accounting major. I didn't start off as an accounting major. I started off as a finance major. But after I took my first finance class, no offense, Bo, because I know you were financial planning.
Financial planning.
It's a little different. But all they talked about was, everybody went to go work for banks. They went and worked for broker dealers, and they started dialing for dollars to recruit, and try to get business or sales. And I was like, I'll never be able to do that. But I saw accounting, and accounting was horrible. I mean, I will tell you, every class was a stress-induced, hard endeavor. But here's why you do it. Every student in the University of Georgia accounting program when I was coming out, every student who graduated had a job before they graduated. And as a student, I was like, this is a guaranteed way for me not to end up in the parents' basement, live with my friends in Atlanta. And guess what happens when the clouds part and you graduate from a very hard major? You find out, hey, it's actually pretty fun in practice. I still say accounting is one of the best majors. It was such a hard thing, but I did it in a way that I was taking into account that, yes, this is going to require hard work.
And I think what's interesting, and Brian, as in most things, I think you were a little ahead of your time because the next bullet point we talk about is know the expected return on your investment. Now, I imagine, I know for sure, when you were coming through college, the internet was still relatively new. It wasn't like you had
That's so sad. That sounds so old.
It does make you sound old, but you'll see where I'm going with this point. You probably did not know how much an accounting major was going to make in first-year salary across the country. That just wasn't something probably published that you had easy access to, right?
Well, now, things are a little different now in the fact that back then you just wanted to make sure you had a job.
You just want to make sure you had a job,
I think right now we're in a unique time in the world where if you want to work, I even heard my daughter talking last night because she's wrapping up some ACT prep. She's going to go get a job after school. And all of her friends are trying to convince them to come work at either the retail shops or the stores, and they're paying like $11, $12, $13 an hour. I was making $3.80 an hour, is what I got paid all through high school. And then when you graduate, my starting degree, graduated with an accounting degree, University of Georgia, started working in public accounting. My first year salary was $28,000. And I was happy about it. But it just shows you, even some of these great degrees don't necessarily start you out up here. It's like most things in life. It's deferred gratification. You have to go, just because you had the education, you got to go build the skill set. So it's going to take a while to get to the great income that these careers create for you in the long term.
I think one of the interesting things you can do is that you can do your research to figure out what your return on investment is. We were talking to Daniel about a different thing that we're working on right now. And he was explaining that one of the majors that he graduated with, because he's a dual major guy, said a lot of the folks that graduate could not actually find jobs in that specific major. You knew the exact opposite. When you went and got your accounting degree, you were going to be able to find a job. So if you are someone who's thinking about studying whatever that thing is.
Why are you being nice and not say? So here's what Daniel shared.
Well, I didn't want to.
Look, I don't care. Daniel's not here to defend himself, but he did share this. Is that he's on vacation, by the way, if y'all think that we kicked Daniel out. But Daniel was a journalism major before he was a financial planning major. That's why we love Daniel's, because he is so unique in the fact that he has the ability to write like a journalist, but then he has the financial planning background. Yep. But he shared in journalism school that out of like 100 graduates, there was 2 jobs. I want let that sink in.
That's very different than what you said. Accounting
let that sink in. There is something, and it goes because that does make the point of know the expected return of your investment. And I would argue, because in a minute I'm going to pivot and we're going to talk about this new world we live in. I don't know if a journalism degree even requires college anymore. I think that most of your big publications want to know the size of your social audience more than they want to know where your degree is from. So know the expected return on your investment, because it's going to be way more powerful than the pedigree of where you're from in a lot of cases.
So once you've calculated or determined what your expected return is, then understand what the opportunity cost is. If I make this choice, what is the thing that I'm giving up? And that thing may very well be I'm going to incur student loan debt. And for the years that I have to pay off that student loan debt, I might not be building my army of dollars, or I have to postpone starting a family, or I have to not be able to begin working towards 10,000 hours of expertise, or whatever that thing is. Every decision you make is going to have some opportunity cost associated with it. Make sure that you understand as you're thinking about furthering your education, you have a real understanding of what that opportunity cost is.
I'm catching on what's going on here. You're the good cop, I'm the bad cop, because I'm going to just go ahead and say this too, is that this is the opportunity cost. When this point made it on the list, I was thinking about all the people. I've told you, I think being an educator is one of the most noble things you can do. My mom did it. My grandmother did it. I always thought I was going to end up in the field of education somehow. But when you go into education, especially K through 12, it's not going to be the greatest paying job. Just like if you go into social work, it likely is not going to be the greatest paying job. I'm always shocked when I find out people who are going to private schools, out-of-state private schools, and then they're shocked when they don't make a lot of money. Look, if you want to go to a private school or an out-of-state private school, that's great if your parents are loaded. But if your parents aren't loaded, or you don't have a big pot of money, or they're not paying you to go to school there, you'd probably be much better served watching how much you're spending on your education, so you don't walk out from graduation day with the biggest ball of chain that you're dragging behind you to go do the great work of education, go do the great work of social work, but yet you've put yourself and strapped yourself with $100,000 of student loan debt. How the heck are you going to get out of that? Know the opportunity costs involved, because it's important. And this is, look, I know a lot of you, you're not in college. You're out of college, and maybe you're struggling through this. That doesn't mean you can't pay it forward to your children, your niece, your nephew, a cousin, or somebody that's going through this stuff. Go through the checklist and understand the opportunity costs of anything you're involved with when it comes to education.
And then the last checkbox on our checklist is exhaust all other options to pay for it before you resort to debt. So there's nothing wrong with getting creative, Brian. I remember when I was coming through high school, right? My story was a little unknown early on in childhood, so I didn't know what college was going to look like or what college was going to cost. But I remember learning in high school that I could take like these AP classes and I get college credit for it, or I could do like joint enrollment and get college. And I was amazed that by the time I actually got to college, without having to spend any extra money other than like paying $100 to take an exam, I had a lot of credits I could take with me. That was a way to really help offset the cost of what that degree was going to cost me. And I'm amazed at how many folks don't realize that there are scholarships available and grants available and work-study programs, or just going to get a job and working yourself through college. There are means and mechanisms that you can pay for your education without taking, I'm going to say the easy, but it's not always easy, without taking the easier route of going out and just taking on debt, because it's what's readily available to you.
I mean, look, being honest, if you don't come from money, and because I think this is an education trap, is something that we need to be very careful about. You do need to get very creative. I think, look, if I was given guidance on a hierarchy of things to consider, I told you community college, if it's not subsidized by your state, it's still going to be substantially cheaper. I'm also amazed at if you're in college, instead of, and this is something I had to learn, I was the first person in my family to go through a professional track like an accounting degree. My parents didn't know anything. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I knew it was a good major. I remember my first tax class where we had to do a case study and prepare a tax return. I was clueless because I didn't have tax preparation software.
Right?
I'd never done a tax return. Meanwhile, all my peers, their parents were accountants, or they had an aunt or an uncle, and they were going to their businesses and putting all these data points into the professional tax software. And I remember thinking, man, this is the greatest profession, not for me, because I'm gonna have to really gut this out and get through it because I don't have the background of others. But I know that I'm getting into something good, and I worry that when you haven't exhausted other things and you don't understand where you're going with it, that you might get yourself in a situation where, what have we benefited from through this whole process? And that's why don't do the debt. Do a co-op. That's the point I want to make on this is I didn't know better. I was working jobs like a plumber's apprentice, driving the school bus, being a lifeguard, and unloading bags at the airport when I was in college. You know what I should have been doing? And I've learned this now. I'm fortunate that it's all worked out. I should have been co-oping.
Yeah, for
Do
sure.
you realize what a benefit and what a career hack it is? They show stats, and we probably should have put it in there, but I've read so many articles where if you will go get a co-op or intern while you're in college, you realize how much of a better likelihood of being employed and actually working in your field of study just by, instead of being the lifeguard, instead of, like I said, working at the airport, yeah, it paid great money. I should have been trying to get an internship. I should have been trying to get a co-op opportunity. That's a great education hack. So community college, co-ops, these are the way to figure out how you get through college as cheap as possible.
You know, we're hiring right now. We're kind of in this constant hiring thing. We're hiring for, creative folks for the Money Guy Show. We're hiring financial folks for the wealth management firm, Abound Wealth. It's just like you said, bro, one of the things that really sets folks out, especially if it's recent college grads or folks that are finishing up their degrees, is if they have worked in the field, worked in the vocation. I mean, it's great to have a job and be able to show work experience, but if you can show real work experience for the Money Guy Show where you've been in digital and creative before, or for the Bound Wealth, if you've actually been at a financial planning firm or a financial firm, it automatically raises your resume to the top of the stack. And I think that's something that more folks ought to recognize when they're out seeking those opportunities.
So, Bo, I want to ask you, because this is, I know where we're going with the show. We've talked about kind of traditional education before. The last stop on the traditional education train is the master's degree.
Yep.
I've always heard, if you get stuck, you feel like you graduated with the wrong degree, just go back to school and get a master's
Get something
degree.
else, yeah.
Is that a good decision?
I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the circumstance. So I'll use a really great example. We had a summer intern in here working with us this summer, and he said, "Guys, I'm doing accounting, but man, I really I like accounting, but I love financial planning. I really want to be a financial advisor. So, I know that University of Georgia offers this financial planning program. Hey, I'm thinking, does it make sense instead of me doing this accounting thing, I'll just, finish, get my bachelor's degree, and then I'll go back to get my master's in financial planning, and then I'll be ready to come work for you guys. It'll be awesome." And we had to kind of like slow him down and say, "Hey, that's great. That's a wonderful idea, but what are you hoping to accomplish? What's the reason for going to get your master's degree?" He's like, "Well, I want to get a job in financial planning." And we kind of very bluntly asked him, "Are you certain that with an accounting degree and some appropriate internship experience, you could not also get a job with an accounting degree? And in order to get the education requirement to sit for the CFP exam, you could go take classes at night or do online self-study as opposed to going to have to back to graduate school?" And he kind of looked at us and he was like, "Oh no, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was an option."
I think, because I think it's, once again, getting education being taken advantage of in some degree, is that we've taken something when people are stuck. All the for-profit colleges really ran rampant with this over the last decade and a half, and I think it's kind of been mitigated because they all kind of imploded upon themselves in a large degree. But it's people were being preyed upon where it was like, just go get your master's. Now, you mentioned the intern. I won't say his name, but his case was a little unique because we have a list of the the degrees with the highest earnings to debt ratios, meaning the ability that you can pay it back the quickest. And you'll notice like number 10 is taxation, which is the same as accounting.
Sure.
And then there are degrees like accounting that require 5 years. I'm one of the last classes that snuck
That
through
got
with
to
a
get through
bachelor
before.
degree. Yeah, I get all the benefits of being an accounting, graduate with an accounting degree, but I didn't have to go the 5th year like all students do now. And I want to tell you, I think that's good if your career requires a certificate, a designation, and you see all these things. It's basically engineering, computers, and taxation. Those are all things.
A lot of STEM, right? I mean, these are all
these are
a lot
all
of
STEM things.
STEM
I think that
jobs.
it is perfectly fine to go get your master's in those things. But Bo was spot on. I'm always amazed at people who say, "I'm going to go get an MBA from this big institution in like financial planning or something." I'm like,
Why?
truthfully, I'd rather you go take one of the study at home courses that is substantially cheaper. Sit for the CFP exam. I will hire you much more likely if you've passed the CFP exam than if you have an MBA from a degree, because the CFP exam is going to show me your aptitude more than you going and getting that MBA. So it's just one of those, it's another one of those things I want to caution you. Know the opportunity cost. Go through that checklist that we provided earlier so you know what are you giving up to go spend this money to go do it, because there might be another path. And that's actually a great segue to kind of transition to, that's all old school.
The way the world has changed.
Yeah, everything we just talked about was very traditional with education. You know, you graduate high school, you aspire to go to college. After you go to college, if you still don't know what you want to do, you go get your master's and on and on and on. And that worked when education, like when I graduated, cost less than $3,000 a year.
Much easier to do that.
Now that we know education costs, we're multiple 5 digits. I think you have to definitely measure twice, cut once, and really look at the scope of what you're doing. And also take a step back and look around and go, the world's also changed. I feel like we are more in a period where it's an idea and skills-based economy. And if you want proof on that, there's a stat that 30% of billionaires haven't graduated college. You know, we all know the story of Steve Jobs didn't graduate college. Right. We know, Mark Zuckerberg didn't graduate college. You know, all these super wealthy people. I don't think Bill Gates graduated college.
I don't know.
I mean, and this is, you start seeing a trend.
But you'd argue they have a very marketable
skill set. They have a
right.
skill set. Nobody cares what degree. I mean, that's the thing I find too. Now, I'm blessed. I went to the University of Georgia, but not that University of Georgia is a Harvard or a Yale. But I think when I get in rooms, like when Fidelity or others bring me up to Boston to talk to other successful financial advisors, there is not one time that they say, "Hey, Brian, where'd you go to school?"
No,
because once you get to a level of success, everybody just assumes you did something, or your experience or something. It got you over the threshold. Education is your gateway. All you're doing is you're knocking on the door. And you're hoping somebody answers to let you in, get your foot in the door so you can start setting the record of how good you are, how good of a worker you are. And more in this new modern society, if you have an idea that's better than others, if you have a skill that's better than others, you don't have to do the traditional track. It has been announced by Google. It's been announced by Ernst & Young. They don't necessarily require college degrees anymore. I mean, here's what I think is interesting. I just got back from Podcast Movement. We're going to FinCon in the next few weeks. Yep. And there's a new trend that's going on. There are people who are working for the Googles, I put the because I'm old. But there's people working for traditional companies too that are all working in content creation, because 92% of businesses are now doing content marketing.
So if you think about it, I want you to rewind back to 2006 when you started this podcast. How many folks, or how popular was it for someone to say that, hey, I make a living doing content creation. I'm a blogger. I'm a podcaster. I'm one of these content creators, and folks were making a living doing that. Was it a commonplace at all back then?
Back then it was, like I said, my wife had to go tell my friends not to make fun of me because it's just a weirdo, oddball hobby.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing that I think that everybody needs to recognize. The world has shifted. I'm not saying, go burn schools down. They're worthless. But I do think you now have to, it's back to our checklist. You have to evaluate what are you going, begin with the end in mind. We talk about that concept so much, the 7 habits of highly effective people. Begin with the end in mind. What are you expecting to get out of education? And a lot of ways, it might not be the traditional path. Now, look, if you want to be the engineer, if you want to be the CPA, if you want to be the doctor or attorney, those are you're going to have to go traditional, and you will be rewarded for your perseverance, and you can structure it in a way, just do it as smart as possible. But if you're working in some of these new fields, maybe you don't need to go the traditional track.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting, we kind of started this show talking about how the income you're able to generate ultimately can help you with your wealth building journey. The more money you make, the more you can save, the more wealth you can build. Here's a list of really great jobs that you can go out and get today without a college degree. And this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Air traffic controller, median salary for air traffic controllers is about $123,000. Nuclear power reactor operator, transportation storage manager, police supervisor, commercial pilot, power plant dispatcher, radiation therapist, elevator installer and repair, detective and criminal investigator, power plant. A lot of these jobs don't require a 4-year degree, and yet the median salaries that can be earned in these vocations is either close to or over 6 figures, which is really, I think, remarkable.
Well, and think about where we are with the economy. We have clients that are worth mega bucks. I mean, I'm talking about, from ranges 20 to $100 million. And some of them have done it by going and learning how to code and do other things. Nobody cares where you learn to code. I mean, can you code?
That's
Did
right.
you write something that actually turns out to be economically viable, that somebody comes and buys you out for multiple hundreds of millions of dollars? I mean, these are the things. If you have a child or you're a person, ask yourself, what is a skill set I can learn right now that 5 years from now, after I get my 10,000 hours of studying and understanding, that will be world-class and worth an absolute fortune? And it might be content creation. It might be coding. It might be that you're a great writer and you can build an audience to do that. But just be honest about it. Or maybe you're traditional. Maybe you're the person that you like numbers and you want to be an accountant or you want to be an engineer. There's a place, just know when, where, and how, and begin with the end in mind, and you can navigate this well.
All right, Brian, so we just heard you, and you said, okay, we're in the skills and this idea-based economy. Well, so I don't need to go to college or traditional education institution. How do I develop those skills? How do I go learn new things? What's unique about this day and age right now that was different maybe 20 or 30 years ago, even in terms of like skills development and self-education?
Well, I think back to myself in even middle school, high school, and even college when you're trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do for a living? And man, it is the greatest time to be alive, because if there's anything you have a curiosity about, you can scratch that itch through the internet. I mean, I think about, we have built an entire community where I can teach you to go from $1 to $5 million just by watching the Money Guy show.
Yep.
And how much do you have to pay for that tuition? Absolutely nothing. I mean, and that's the power of the internet. That's the power of everything that's been harnessed. I think about, you can, if you just have a library card, you can go read or listen to about any book out there because it's all digitally available. Think about, I see my daughter, because she's now, and this is embarrassing because I consider myself a math person.
Right.
But she's now, since she's a senior in high school, doing the calculus and all the advanced mathematics. She's so smart mathematically. I see her on Khan Academy all the time. If a teacher can't, bridge the gap of knowledge in the classroom, she's going to Khan Academy and seeing if there's some nugget that she can go learn from that. Think about what YouTube, I mean, guys, just this weekend, I was rotating the tires on my Tesla. Do you think I did that just off of being super handy? No, I went and watched 3 YouTube videos to figure out how to do it appropriately, make sure I had the right gear for safety, to protect the car. It's the same thing when my wife's key fob quits working. You go on YouTube to figure out how you replace the battery instead of going to the dealership and paying $250 for a $3 battery that you bought off Amazon. There are so many skill sets that you can explore, you can figure out what your passion is, because it is back to, and I talked about this on another show. I had a friend from childhood, one of my best friends I ever met when I was like 5 years old, moved to my brand new neighborhood, and we were throwing dirt clods at each other. But he said, well, what are you doing? Because we hadn't talked to each other in decades. And he goes, what do you do for fun now? And it caught me off guard, and I was like, I write content.
Money Guy show?
I mean, I do the money. I mean, this is my hobby. I actually work every day in something I'm so passionate about that I love it. If you can find what you're supposed to be doing, put on this planet to do, whether it's education, whether it's, writing, whether it's designing something, or just being, the best at whatever it is, there are more opportunities now than any other time in history.
And Brian, you put a great quote on here. This is from Henry Ford. It says, anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or at 80. Anyone who keeps learning stays young. And I think that's so encouraging because we live in an age where it is so easy to continue to learn, where it's
Yeah.
so easy to continue to add to that skill set. And if you're someone out there and you're curious about personal finance, or you're curious about how do I stretch my dollars 5 to 10% further than my peers? How do I build to a life of financial abundance? How do I allow my money to give me the freedom to do the things that I want to do, when I want to do them, the way I want to do them? We're going to keep loading you up. We're going to keep cranking out the content so that you can take your finances to the next level. If you've not gone out to check our website, you can go to moneyguide.com/resources. We have tons of free resources available that will help pour into your financial education. Maybe you want to know how powerful your dollars are, or how you can turn your grandchild into a millionaire, or how to refinance a mortgage, or what's the correct order of operations to work through my financial affairs. We have all of that available for free so that you can educate yourself.
We screwed up.
Uh-oh.
At the beginning,
Uh-oh.
I told you I wanted to mention, by the way, what do you go to school for so you can get a job afterwards? We're hiring. I mean, guys, go to, and I know on aboundwealth.com we have a career section. Do we have a career section on the Money Guy show?
Also
channel
on Money Guy too.
There's also, if you go to moneyguy.com or aboundwealth.com, we have a careers section on the website. We'd love to have you come work with us. I mean, there's multiple positions we're trying to hire for. We're just looking for the right family
for good
members to
people.
come join us. So come check it out. And Bo was not wrong. The resource, I should have offered up our free deliverable, the Financial Order of Operations. This is completely free on moneyguy.com/resources. There's a gazillion other free things on there too, between refinancing, taxes, education. We have it all out there. Go check it out. And guys, we're going to keep creating content because this is our passion. This is what we do with our spare time, which, like I said, in front of childhood friends, that sounds a little ridiculous. But just keep coming back. We're going to keep loading you up. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team, out.